Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Xah Talk Show. Today is 2020, May 26th, Tuesday, San Francisco time, 11 o'clock 30 minutes in the afternoon. So, hi guys. So, what are we going to talk about? Show today's topic. So I was going to thinking, good morning Green Deck. I was thinking, so we had some discussions today in our XahTV Discord about tiling Windows Manager. That's a big topic, and I talked about that a few times in the past on my YouTube. So tiling Windows Manager, keyboard efficiency, those type of questions. So we can talk about that. I did a giant rant today in Discord about that topic. So that's one topic. Then we're going to talk about, hey, good morning Emily, glad to see you here. Good morning to UK and Green Deck. Good morning to Russia. And good morning Vanya to India. And good morning Andrew. Andrew, you are in USA. Ariran. Oh, do we have is Vanya is Ariran, or I got it wrong. So anyway, type the topics, okay? Type with my name on it. So one topic is tiling Windows Manager, and the other topic is syntax coloring. So we've been debating about syntax coloring. I have quite a few articles on that. Syntax coloring, very interesting topic. So syntax coloring, tiling Windows Manager, or syntax coloring, or you guys have some questions, regarding my life. We can talk about that. So anyway, ask me questions, okay? You guys need to type. You need to type with my name. Set the topic, and we're gonna talk. So let me begin random then. So here's my Emacs as usual, and you can see all my keyboard commands on the right. So today's topic is going to be, let me show you, okay, syntax coloring or tiling Windows Manager, or syntax coloring or other things, okay, show in browser. But first of all, let me show you about today's background image, the Gmail man. The Gmail man. Okay, what about the Gmail man? Let's see if I have it here. Yes, the Gmail man. So the Gmail man, you have to go to this link. Okay, so you have to go to, where's my link? Search the most useful feature, XahTV Gmail man. Let's see if we can find it. No. XahTV, what? Google ice cream. Okay, Google ice cream and the Gmail man. Okay, I'm trying to find a link to my article. Okay, XahArts. There it is. Google ice cream. Can Google be trusted? Now this is back in, I don't have a date here. This is about 2010. So beginning around 2010, big Google is becoming a superpower, and a lot of people are starting to criticize Google, and this is one of them. Okay, don't be evil video. This is criticizing Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google at the time. So let's get the date. And actually, let me copy So this video is started in 2010 September. Someone, I don't know who is the group, Consumer Watchdog, they are criticizing Google severely. Back in 2010, in my opinion, I still believe Google is pretty good. So anyway, I collected video. So anyway, let me show you. You see, so you can see my Emacs workflow. Emacs workflow. Here is how I add a video. Okay, so you need to actually, I need to go back here, copy the URL, paste it here, make a link, and cut that we just did, and now go to open that URL, magnify, and the video is on top. Let me put it here. So here is the description of the video I just copied. I didn't have that before, but now let's put it here. So show in browser. So there it is. So that is my page, Google Ice Cream. So that's an interesting video you might watch. But today's background image is this one, the Gmail man. This one is very funny. So am I doing okay? Okay, so that's a very funny video. You can go watch that. So that is today's background. I'm talking in quietly ASMR stream because right now it's close to midnight here, so I have roommates, so I have to be quieter. So what is today's topics, guys? Type the topic. So good morning, Jagan. And Jagan, you are in USA, right? What state? So let's see what's questions. Okay, so type your questions. Okay, the talk show is going to depend on your questions. Tiling Windows Manager, or let me show you the topic again. Close that, close that. Okay, so we have today's topic. Okay, since you guys don't have a topic here yet, I'm going to good morning, Animal Killer. Animal Killer, where you from? Don't type things like that, okay? Because Google censorship. It's Google, it's not me. Because I show that, I'm gonna get banned. Okay, so since you guys need to type a topic, okay? So tell us about tiling window managers, okay? Eastern Supremacist, New York East Standard Time, okay? Okay, tiling Windows Manager. So I'm gonna talk about that. But first of all, let me show you something you need to buy. Now this is Elgato Stream Deck keypad. Now this is a programmable keypad, and each key comes with a LCD display, like a little TV. So you got like 1, 2, 3, 24 of them, 24 TVs. So this is fantastic. And guess how much is it? It's not too expensive. It is only $150. Peanuts for you guys programmers, you wonderful programmers. So the news, so this is pretty old. This is actually 3 years old. Now they have a newer version with 32 little TV screens, so you can check it out. So this is one of them. There are a few others. Let me show you. Keyboard with a TV display. So here's another one, and this one is based on display ink. So this is not using the LCD technology. It's actually, display ink, such as like Amazon's what you call them, you know display ink. So this one is also not too expensive. It's a full keyboard, and if you want to buy them, let's see if they are still in operation. I think they are. Let's check. So this is Sound Design keyboard. Each key has a display ink. Pre-order. I think I'm not sure what's the deal. They've been around for like 5 years now, and so anyway, check it out yourself. So this is another one, not too expensive. This is only 100 something. Apparently display ink is less expensive to make than LCD displays. So then we have the other one, the Optimus Popularis keyboard. Now this is actually the earliest. This one, let me show you this one. Okay, actually this one, Optimus Maximus keyboard, was announced around 2001. Yes, 2001, on slashdot.org. This is the very first online forum for programmers, for nerds. So when they announced this keyboard, it didn't come out until 3 or 5 years later, and it's like $4,000. So each key is a little TV display. You can see a video here. Anyway, there's a video. Eventually it came out, and then later on, this one, for example, this one is also pretty old. By now it's like 10 years old. So they have a different model with improvements in technology. This is kind of the first one with the display keys. Okay, so that's about that. So some of the keyboard, programmable keyboard. Now programmable keyboard is very useful. Let me explain. Okay, so tiny Windows Manager, why they suck. Okay, let's talk about that. One more thing. Let me show you one more thing before we go into that. Actually, this is related, because programmable keypads, I highly recommend them. For example, every one of you do web browsing, right? When you do web browsing, you need to switch tabs. How do you do it? Usually you go there with your mouse slowly, and you click, and you go here and slowly and click. This is Art Deco. Let me magnify. For example, then you go here, slowly click, and if you want to close this tab, you have to go there slowly and for that close it. To reopen, you have to move your hand back to the keyboard. Command Shift T to reopen it. You see, that's tedious, that's no good. But usually you also have a keyboard shortcut. For example, on Windows it's Control 1. Go to the first tab. On the Mac it's Command 1. You see, Command 1 goes to the first tab. So you have Command 2, Command 3, and so on. Those are no good. You see, for me, I have programmed into my mouse. So if I want to, you see, left, 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 right, 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 left, 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 close it, press a key, close it, press a key. I don't have to move my hands to the keyboard or to the mouse. Let's reopen them. So because so I have programmed them into my mouse, into this mouse. You can find it on my website. But however, mouse, if you have a programmable keypad which does similar function and which is fantastic. So you can switch to previous tab, next tab, or previous window. Typically you do like this. And let me show you command tab. Okay, this command tab or the alt tab is the most idiotic fuck people do. So I command tab, which one I want to switch. I want to go to Discord. Let's switch back. Oops, I passed. I fucking passed. Now shift. It's the most idiotic, inefficient. So you don't want. So if you want to switch to the previous window, by the way, when you use this functionality, the 90% of the time, what you are doing is switching to the last app. Almost always 90% of the time you want to switch to the last app or last window. So you don't need to hold down command, press tab, and release it, then tab. You don't need that. You want single button press, like one single button. So do I have it? I don't have it. The reason I don't have it right now is I'm moving, as you know. Let me show you as you know, recently there's some changes in my life, so I'm moving. So I'm right now with this keyboard, and this ultimate hacking keyboard does not have that many keys. For example, it does not even have function keys. If I need to press function, for example F2, actually I switched. Let's look at this one, F6. If I want to press F6, I have to hold this and press that. Fucking no good. This keyboard, I don't like this sort of 60%, this nerds 60%. Fuck. You want real function keys, okay, single key press function keys. So because I'm on this keyboard, therefore I don't have my usual optimal setup. By the way, I don't have it on Kinesis either. Let me show you. I have showed these 1,000 times, but a lot of people have not seen it. So on the Kinesis keyboard, as you can see, or maybe you cannot see, let's see if I can see. So you see, they don't have function keys neither. You have these tiny buttons. You see these tiny buttons, that's function keys. So I end up not having my optimal setup. So what you need is a keypad. Again, I don't have it now because I was moving, so I don't have my usual optimal setup. But my current setup is good enough. But normally I would have a keypad, programmable keypad. So if I want to switch previous tab, next tab, close tab, copy, cut, paste, previous window, just one key, or switch the window within the current app, just one key press. So that is why you see, that's why you need a programmable keypad, single key press, because people complain, oh, you got RSI. You want single press, key press, because the chord combination, that's one of the reason people get RSI, especially on a standard normal mechanical keyboard. So you have to control alt fuck, this fuck up your hands. So we are talking about efficiency here. We are also talking about hand health. So that is why I highly recommend a programmable keypad. First of all, you get the programmable mouse with 10 buttons. 5 is not enough. You want 10 or more. In fact, I have this mouse. I talked about these topics quite many times. I have this mouse, and I showed it before. But the problem with this mouse is that you got all these buttons. They actually work. You might think, oh, they are too small and cramped, and actually they work fine. but however the buttons is not as easy to press compared to a mechanical key on a mechanical keyboard. So if you work with computers for 10 hours a day with this mouse, although it saves you from Control Alt fuck, however, if you keep switching windows or stuff with that mouse, copy, cut, paste, and so on, you have other problems, with your thumb because it requires pressure. Again, all these are related to what we are going to talk about, tiling Windows Manager. Okay, so if now here is a time, if you have disagreement with my arguments about the tiling Windows Manager, say it. Okay, I'll say it and I'll shoot it down. So let's go to tiling Windows Manager. Now we have talked about programmable keyboards. Now this is Rick and Morty, fascinating topic. Rick and Morty is the cosmic horror show, and you can see there's a philosophy, the philosophy of Rick and Morty. I love this show. I watched tons of them on YouTube, the clips, since I don't have a TV or Netflix or whatever. Okay, so let's go back to tiling Windows Manager, today's main topic, I guess. Programmable keypads, okay, tiling Windows Manager. Now, so I wrote this article back in 2012, and somehow it becomes extremely popular. It's being on Reddit 2 or 3 times. It's being on Hacker News 2 or 3 times, and I used to have discuss, comments. You have tens, lots of comments. Most of them are idiotic Linux nerds. So post your reasons, okay? Post George and some of the others. You have disagreements, or who was it? We argued today. So you have disagreements, say it so I can address it. I'm just giving my view to you. I'm just presenting my view. It's not necessarily your opinion is no good. Half of the time it is. Okay, so let me go over the comments. Okay, comment, guys. So are you Chinese? Yes, I'm Chinese. Animal killer. Animal killer, where you from? Tiny Windows managers, okay. Are you Chinese? I never understood them, but it seems they are very popular among more vocal Linux users. Yeah, Tiny Windows managers, it's one of the what you might call a dramatic thing. It's like Emacs and Vim. People talk about all the time. Okay, so any questions about Tiny Windows managers? Because otherwise, I'm just gonna talk about it maybe a little bit, because I'm kind of tired of this topic. I'm so let's see what's the comments. Do you use Vim? No, I don't use Vim. Well, I use occasionally, so let me tell you the story, okay? There is a hum. Wait, do you hear? Yeah, another question I want to ask you guys. Do you guys hear hum? Like, if you put on headphones, do you hear when I'm not talking? Do you hear some, like, my machine humming? Because that happened when I started to do video here, and today I changed the surge suppressor. So does that still happen? Do you still hear it, Emily? Okay, well, that reminds me, Emily's setup. Emily's workflow. I want to criticize it. Now, okay, so we loud humming. Oh shit. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I unplug. So let's see what I can do. Yeah, electric hum. Shit. I don't want to unplug it now because then, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, so let it be today. Next time I'll try to plug it into my Mac, the headset. So telling Windows managers. So in this article, I'm talking about the optimal setup. So I'm doing a flame on the tiling Windows managers. I think it sucks. Now there are two aspects to tiling Windows managers. One, the tiling Windows managers, it's a tool on Linux. It allows you to it has many commands to rearrange your windows. For example, you can have your windows side by side. For example, this window, sometimes you want them side by side exactly. So I do it manually. I move it here. But in the tiny window manager, a tool on Linux, you can press a key and have them side by side and things like that. They so-called tile the window. So anyway, the tiny Windows managers, these two, there are several of them. There are like seven or 10 of them. The Linux nerds are crazy about it. So there are two aspects about that. One is that these tools, they usually provide many commands and keyboard configuration shortcuts that these commands rearrange your windows that is more powerful and flexible than what the default Linux provide. So tiling window managers is actually gives you lots of commands plus key configuration, and their key configuration is usually very powerful. You can set your keys to do what you want, much more powerful than let's say directly dealing with X11's keys. So it's a very flexible and powerful tool. And Ariran, oh thank you. So let me finish that. So tiling Windows Manager, two aspects. One, it's very flexible tool, powerful tool, because it gives you many commands to manipulate your windows, which otherwise you don't have these commands. Then it provides very powerful configuration for shortcuts to call those commands. So that's one thing. Okay, the other thing is tile windows. Okay, let me show you what's an example. So here is what tiled windows looks like. So you have a screen, you don't want gaps. For example, right now in my screen I have several gaps. I have gaps in between. Like each window is in some irregular position. But with tiling Windows Manager, the ideal, the name tiling Windows, is that the ideal is that you don't have gaps between windows, so that every window is in the size and position optimal, optimal size and position, which is this. So that's why they are called tiling window managers. Now this is the most idiotic fuck in the universe. Tiling Windows managers. So the idea is that you don't have gaps between windows anymore. But however, you see, what happens if all your windows is just terminals, text files, then maybe that's okay. But as soon as you have graphics, maybe you have YouTube, for example, streaming, or if you are doing gaming, Twitch. imagine you are a gamer, you are playing Fortress or some 3D game or Minecraft, then you need tiling Windows Manager, so it must tile with other windows. So fuck the fucking idiot, fuck these nerds. They don't understand. So to these nerds, they are thinking, oh, when you are playing games, that's an exception, so they don't consider gameplay as part of part of using the computer. That it's like that's an exception. Or for example, when you are watching movies on YouTube, you are watching my YouTube live stream, right? Sometimes you full screen. So what's with the tiny Windows managers? Well, you don't use it. You just full screen it. You don't use it. So anyway, so my point here is that the very idea of tiling window manager, so that you have efficient arrangement without gaps, that's idiotic. Because once you have different programs, applications, calculator, scientific graphics system, you plot differential equations, or you watch movies in another screen. So one screen display YouTube, one screen scientific. When you tile them together, you get situations like these scratched clock. I cannot possibly imagine these Linux idiots. I cannot possibly, I have arguments with these Linux, these tech nerds, fuckheads for over 20 years. And sometimes in our arguments, I cannot possibly imagine who the fuckhead, do they have a brain to show, look at this example. Now this example is from DIM, dream, okay? Do what I mean, that's what it stands for. What I mean, that's that's part of the Unix philosophy. They love these puns, dim, do what I mean, things like that. So I cannot possibly imagine. So you see this one, someone in someone wrote a library to have this so-called Fibonacci arrangement. The Fibonacci arrangement is that, to simplify, so you have a rectangle, you cut it in half, then the other half you cut it in half, the other half you cut it in half, so you have this arrangement. It's like a Fibonacci spiral. So someone wrote code to tile your windows into this Fibonacci arrangement, and they it's open source. They put it up so it shows up on the DWM, my mistake, dynamic window manager, so they put up on the DWM website as kind of like exemplary example of the power of it. But so I cannot possibly imagine someone would actually show their work as my work, to have a window that's a squashed clock. These fucking Linux idiots. When you watch, this happens on Linux all the time. Like, back in, let's say, 2000s, there are tons of video DVD players for Linux. Often, very often, almost all of them, half of them at least, when you play a DVD, it shows like squashed. How does that happen? I mean, what do you like to watch a movie where it's squashed vertically or horizontally? Do you find that interesting? I cannot imagine. Someone would show this code to actually show a squashed clock. So this is what I don't understand with these tech geekers. So anyway, back to tiling Windows Manager. Let me summarize. So two things. What these tools do is that it provides many powerful commands for manipulating your Windows or workspace. Okay, that's one thing. Now this part is very good. I would love it. Okay, and especially you will be able to configure keyboard shortcuts, to rearrange Windows the way you like. That part is fantastic. The other part, the tiling Windows, it's almost useless. Let me explain why is it useless. Okay, many Linux people, they like virtual workspace, the idiotic virtual workspace. Mac actually have it too. I'm not going to show you because I don't use it. It takes time to actually I can show you the. Yeah, you see, I can add a virtual workspace. Let me show you. You see, now I have two. Now I have a second virtual desktop. The fucking idiots, these people. So let me show you again. So I can add I can add another one. Now I have 3 virtual space. Oh look, fantastic. Oh look, I can like wait, can I open the Firefox? You see, new window Firefox. so that's so that's virtual workspace. Okay, where am I going? Let me get back. Okay, hold on a second. I don't want fucking virtual workspace. You see? Yeah, okay, let me get back to it. So tidying Windows, man. So Linux people, they love this concept of virtual workspace. The purpose, most people, they love it because you can group your work, categorize your work in different workspaces. For example, one workspace you are doing coding, compiling. The other workspace you are browsing the web. Let's say works related, browsing the web. Then you have another workspace you are doing online shopping. You're looking at keyboards or clothing or whatever. So virtual space. Now you have to realize. So you have to realize, doesn't matter how many virtual workspaces you have. It's not like you are increasing the workspace. You are not increasing any screen. You are not increasing your screen space. Actually, if you, like me, if you have only one workspace, it is itself is already virtual because you can move windows. All these windows are virtual, in a sense, virtual. It's not like when you have virtual space you have more virtuality. It's the same virtualness. My point is that, so what does this workspace are doing? Essentially, they are doing is that they provides some sort of grouping structure. Okay, grouping structure. I'm kind of digressing, and now. So anyway, I want to get back to, so that's kind of a digression about workspace. Why do I not like them? It doesn't really, it has a little to do with tidying Windows Manager, but it's related. But I'm talking about virtual workspace. I'm not doing a good job. So why is it no good? Well, it's no good because virtual workspace, the essence of virtual workspace, what they do is that they provide a kind of a grouping, the categorization. So for your work, categorize your work, and in order to use that feature, you have to put effort to it. For example, multiple virtual space does not automatically give you, let's see, it doesn't automatically group your windows into works related or compiler related. It doesn't. You have to do it yourself. You have to manage it. So when you actually use these workspaces, multiple workspaces, you have to sometimes move this window to this workspace because this workspace is for works related things. You have to move movies to, it's more work. It's actually more work, I would claim. Okay, and also you don't need it because why do you need to categorize? There are some situations you could use that, but in general no, because why do you need to categorize? For example, alternatively, for example, let's say desktop 1, okay, virtual space 1. For example, my workflow, if I want Emacs, if I want to, let's say, coding related, I just switch to Emacs. Okay, I just switch to Emacs. Press one single key, I have my Emacs. If I want a new window, full screen. If I want full screen, I press a key, full screen. If I want to Google, I go to Firefox or Google. You can set up your keys so that same amount keys. What's the point of categorizing your work? It actually categorizing your windows. It actually takes a lot more effort, a lot more keystrokes to do them. You have to, a lot of digression. Okay, let me get back to Tiling Window Manager. Okay, so actually it's related because Tiling Windows Manager also help you, manage the virtual workspace. So you can have a command that sends a window to workspace 2 or 3, things like that. Too much work, more keystrokes and control meta alt fuck, no good. When you install Linux, for example, let's say Ubuntu XFCE, one of the most simplest one, XFCE, you have like 20 by default. You have 20 keys, like Control Alt right arrow, Control Alt up arrow. You have like 20 keys dealing with the virtual workspace. Fuck. You don't want that. You want simplicity. Okay, so that's about virtual workspace. Now let me get back to Tiling Windows Manager. So when we talk about, and let me and I'm gonna talk about Emily. Okay, Emily's way. So we are talking about the optimal workflow, or optimal workflow. So when we talk about this subject, there are several things we actually need to agree upon. For example, what is your monitor size? What is your monitor size? Do you work with a laptop? Laptop usually you don't have a big screen. Is that if you work on your laptop, or you have a typical 17-inch screen, like I have 24-inch, one single monitor, 24-inch screen diagonal, or like Emily, you have three huge screens. These days it's fairly popular. You have a 24-inch screen here, then you have a vertical screen here, then you have another one, or sometimes it's fairly popular. So when we talk, if we are talking about the optimal, the utmost optimal workflow, you have to consider which screen are you dealing with. Tiny little screen, or a normal, 24-inch screen, or 3 monitors. That's a question. That's one of the things you have to decide, because for different systems you actually have different choices that would be considered optimal. Okay, so that's one thing. So besides screen size, you also, for example, should you use the tiling window manager, the tiling feature? How useful is that? Depends on how big is your screen, or how many screens do you have. The answer will be different. Okay, so that's one thing. How many, what's the size of your screen? The other thing you have to consider is your what's the other? Keyboard. Yes, keyboard. Okay, what keyboard are you using? Are we talking about? We are talking about the optimal workflow, which whether to use Tiling Windows Manager, which includes key binding. What key binding to use. So if you are going to talk about key binding keyboard, the optimal choices of keys or things like that, or whether you should use chord keys or function keys like me, single key press, which is better. Single key press, function keys, it's a bit far, you have to reach, or control G, for example, it's closer, you don't have to reach, but it's a chord. Which one is better? That depends. That all these questions, so depends on what keyboard are we assuming. Are you using a stupid laptop keyboard, or using a normal 100 key external keyboard, or you use something like me, some sort of Batman keyboard, programmable keyboard? So I think I drawn on too much. Let me read the comments. Okay, let's see what you guys saying. Hold on a second, let me see. Am I still? How long I've been talking? 47 minutes. I think I talked too slow. Anyway, so let me just quickly mention one thing about Tiling Window Manager. I haven't begun yet. I haven't begun yet. So Emily, okay, so Tiling Windows Managers, if you have a laptop screen, a small screen, basically Tiling Window Manager is not much useful, because for a laptop screen you almost always want it full screen. Okay, you want it full screen. You don't want because if you split into two, it becomes too small. You cannot see a video, things like that. You almost always want your full screen. So Tiling Windows Manager is not that useful if you have a laptop, if laptop is what we're talking about. But on the other extreme, if you have three giant screens, then again, you don't really need Tiling Windows Managers. That's my opinion, but I would also say that is the scientifically valid conclusion. Okay, if you have three giant monitors, or two giant monitors, or one single 30-inch giant monitors, you don't need Tiling Windows either, because you have so much screen space. You don't need to arrange them to be proper. It doesn't matter if it has gaps, it's fine. You have lots of space, it's fine. So screen size matters. Okay, and so you have two scenarios here where we can see Tiling Window Manager is not that useful. You don't need it. Okay, so what am I so let's see what's the comments, and maybe that's it for today. So there's a lot of things here I want to say. Let me read the comments. Okay, Ari Ran says, what are pros and cons of joining a startup after college? What's the truth? Okay, there's no truth about it. It depends on your personality. So for me, if I were you, it depends on personality and your personal situations. If you just graduated college, and suppose you have two choices, one is to join a big corporation, Apple, Google, IBM, or you also got offer to join a startup. Which one would you choose? Let's say the benefits are somewhat comparable. Of course, depends on how much they pay. But if they are about the same, I myself we typically join a startup. In fact, most of my life it's been on with a startup, because startup, you have more freedom to do what you want. You have more control. Usually startup, only 5 people, 3 people. You are the boss. Like, you can be creative. And also, to join a startup, usually that also means you need to be a good programmer. You can write programs from the ground up without basing on some existing code or how to. You must do it. You need to do something. Your startup need to do something. You have to do it from scratch, from nothing, as opposed to if you work in a company. Usually it's some given project and you have mentors and stuff. So that's my answer. I don't know if that answers your question, or where does that make sense, or because these kind of questions, there's a lot of depends on you. What's the situation. There's no right answer. So let me read the comments. Okay. Immaterial whether use Vim or Emacs, Tmux does a different job than in different Flaming incoming. The hum is bearable. Okay. Harmonize with it. Can fix it another time. Okay, it's not that bad. 2007 thing. You can pick this or George's topic in Discord. What's going on Discord? When it's live, it's better to post on YouTube, because So what are the questions for me? Anyway, just repeat it, okay? If something if you want to ask, repeat it. Let me turn it around. Good thing about tiling window manager. What would be good things? Yeah, so the good things about tiling window managers is to use purely for its commands to manipulate windows. That would be useful. For example, right now, if I want to move this window to the left a bit, there's no way to do it on the Mac except manually drag it. But on Linux, you can, if you have a tiling Windows manager, you can somewhat control it with a key. Suppose I want to have this window. The only way I do it on the Mac is go here, aim it carefully, and drag it. There's no, or if I want it to span vertically, there is no easy way other than manually do it. But if you have tiling Windows Manager, you can do it fast, and also with a key of your choice. So that's a good thing about tiling window managers. Most people, these users, when they respond, when they see an article, why this article is popular, I can tell you why. Because drama. Because my clickbait is successful. I start the article by saying, tried XMonad today for real. Currently 1 hour into it. Tiling Windows is unusable and inefficient. So I say, I started to use XMonad, which is the Haskell fuck. Haskell is the hackers something. When you mention Haskell, everyone is, oh, Haskell, this monad, and it's like advanced. So I said, oh, I tried it for 1 hour and it's stupid. And that, when these Linux nerds see that, oh my God, what's going on? This guy, who is this guy? They then become popular. Well, part of the reason this article is popular is because that clickbait. But in order to be popular, it's not just the clickbait title. You have to have some at least some substance. So let me be polite and say I'm lucky. Okay, so I got some substance here. I explain in detail my reasons, and I give you a challenge. Try this workflow. I give you an alternative, and littered with tens of other links to my own website that tells you how to, like for example, how do you set up mouse to single click to open file? I have an article on that. How do you why should you ban code keys? I have an article that each of these article is written days, usually years of research. What about the keyboards? So I have an article on that, on all the keyboards. So key binding. Oh, some of these Linux people, they Linux people, these typically Linux nerds, these tech geekers, they are competitive, and they are male. Usually they are young males. Young males are very competitive. That's nature. Okay, that's the nature of human animals. Not women, not girls. They don't need to be competitive. They will have children. But males, yes, you do. Because if you are not the alpha male, you get no girlfriends. Okay, that's why in thousands of fairy tales and stories, you want to get a girl. Get girl is the old goal. Males has to be competitive, and especially young males. Like in societies, you have rituals, or in military, you have rituals to get the boys to fight, and to you want to be competitive. Otherwise you end up like me, a failure. So when Linux people in this nerds community, they talk they debate, they argue all the time. You are idiot because this that. No, no, you are actually because Emacs or Vim this that. Half of it is actually just the, it's just the, they're actually, it's just the competitiveness, one-upmanship. That's part of it. That's the most part of it. They are in the debate not because some subject is important. It's just because let's see who knows better, who is better. Let's see who is the alpha male. That's what happens. So so let's get back to part of the reason why this article is popular, and the way I have all these links about all the technical details of Linux in particular. For example, Linux, this article is about how to set a key to switch to browser. So I have Mac OS, Windows, how to auto hard key, and Linux. So I have an article to show you what to do. So I do my homework. I did my homework. So this is part of the reason. These Linux nerds, they see some substance at least, so they find value to, I guess, spread this article. So anyway, I have lots of comments on this article, and actually I kind of mentioned, talk about this article in 2 previous videos. Most of the comments, again, let me get back to the point about this. People, it's like, the debate about VI versus Emacs. It's not really a important question. However, VI versus Emacs, so-called religious war, they, why do geeks do that? Mostly, half of the reason is because they are young males. Okay, they are doing it is as part of the ritual, to be one-upmanship, to see who is better, who knows better, who is a better programmer, who is, they talk about that, not because the topic is really important, VI versus Emacs. But these people, these nerds, they don't realize it. They don't know. They think they are actually debating reasons. Okay. So in the same way, what I was going to say, yeah. So a lot of people, when they debate, they comment or so-called criticize. They're not really criticizing. Vast majority of the response I get is without content. They haven't spent 10 minutes to really think about the issues. They just glanced over. For example, they see the clickbait. Oh, this guy, he tried Xmonad Haskell for 1 hour and he think it's idiotic. They saw that, and immediately, without reading, the whole thing, immediately they have something to say. They say, oh, actually, this guy is an idiot. Look, he only tried Xmonad for 1 hour. How can he possibly say that it's idiotic? This guy must be a troll. That's what they say. But beyond that, you have to, if you are really concerned about the efficiency of key binding, you have to think. You have to actually think for 10 minutes, for an hour, for 10 hours. You have to think about it. Then when you reply, you have something of substance. Then when I read your reply, I can see, oh, this guy actually has a valid reason why some parts of my article or the whole thing is wrong. Is actually incorrect or bad reasoning, something like that. You have to the effort, how much you spend, the effort you put into something shows. Okay, it will show. Doesn't matter what thing. When you put good effort into it, a lot of effort, whatever you say or the result will show. It will show. So most of my replies on Hacker News on Reddit, they are just brainless. It's, oh, this guy is a troll, or oh, actually no, he's wrong because I do it this way. I use Vim and I do it this way. It's like, what's the point of telling me your habit? Okay, so that's it. So anyway, Another thing about this kind of thing is habit. Habit plays the most important part about what do you think is the best workflow, things like that. Because for vast majority of people, vast majority programmers, they never actually experimented with different workflow. Whatever they think, typically when they say, oh, this is the best way, oh, you should rebind key this way or that way, their opinions is just a happenstance. They happen to do it that way, and for years, they just used, habit. They developed a habit into a particular way, and they think that's the best way because habit. They actually never, like a logician, you sit down, think about what are the possible ways, about key binding or workflow. You think about all the possible ways, then you systematically explore or logically eliminate which way is the best way. They never do that. It's like this idea never ever come up with, from these idiot, these Linux fanatics nuts heads. Okay, that's it for that, and maybe that's it for today. It's hot today. Is super hot in California here. So am I still okay? So what's up, guys? That's it for today, right? Any more questions? Any more questions? Your last chance to reply. Okay, let's see what. So what level should tiling be at? So what level should tiling be at? Oh my God, the Fibonacci culture. Dim. Elisa. Elias Jami. So far we have EMT Max tapping on nuts. Daniel Diaz Fernandez. Hey Daniel, haven't seen you for a while. Now you are from Spain, that's right. So Daniel says, aren't you the one who studied Haskell, like the homotopy type theory? I think, yeah, I remember. I think. Do you have research anything about the biomechanics of typing? No, not really. I do have an article too. It's an amazing topic that would be interesting for a future Xah talk show. So if you want to know so there are some, okay, let me talk about this. So repetitive strain injury, hand pain when you type too much, that actually we do not, as far as I know, yeah, I know, so far our medical science do not fully understand what's going on. Okay, we do not fully understand what's causing it. Why? How do I know? Let me show you. Okay, and so you go to my keyboard blog and you go to, where's the article? So there it is, typing habits, hand injury. Okay, then we go to there are some scientific papers, the RSI experts, basically they will tell you that the medical science do not fully understand exactly what's going on. Okay, and in fact, for example, you see this is a common suggestion about ergonomics. Everything is 90 degrees. Your legs, your knees bent 90 degrees. Your hip bent 90 degrees. Your elbow is supposed to be 90 degrees. Your head, in general, it's a good suggestion. But there is no very scientific validation of this. I think in general this is good because. But for example, there are many people who don't sit this way. Most people don't sit this way, but they are fine. They type a lot, they are fine. Anyway, so let me try to find the scientific article I want to show you because I have a few. I have a couple at least about keyboard, about ergonomic keyboard, the science of ergonomic keyboards by these researchers. Okay, I don't know where is it. It's let's I have to think about. There, research on keyboard ergonomics. So here you can see a PDF which is by this UC Berkeley professor David Rempel. He is a professor of ergonomics. Okay, so he wrote an article about that. The split keyboard, an ergonomics success story. So he wrote an article about that. He tells you about different angles. And then there's another article by a different ergonomics researcher, biomechanics of upper limbs. You can go read it. I have an excerpt of it. It's a book actually, so go there, buy the book. The biomechanics of the upper limbs. Okay. So I'm going to copy the URL. So this is, search for the title Scientific Research on Keyboard Ergonomics. Put my name in front of it. You will find this article. So let me copy that. Okay, I think actually that's about it today. Let me put it here. And later on it will show up on my video, YouTube links. So the two articles, but there's more. So for example, there's another article, the latest thinking on computer-related pain. This is again by David Rempel, and this is an interview, a question and answer session. They interview him, and he talked about, for example, they talked about this posture. And basically he says, this posture, and he says there's no, this is not medically like we don't really understand why this works. Like usually you see these, they'll say, oh, lumbar support, for your lower back. That's semi bullshit. But however, I do recommend this in general, especially the monitor height. It matters, and because you can feel it. If you sit on the wrong chair, you can feel it. Because I used to, even when I was 18, when I was 18 years old, before I even used the computer, there's this chair I sit that to watch TV, and that gave me back pain. Okay, so tiny window means okay. You can find amazing and interesting info in Turman approach piano techniques about biomechanics and easily transferable to typing. Usually I question all those piano thing. Like often when we talk about typing, the proper typing related to hand pain, things like that, many people, programmers, they'll say, oh, I'm also a pianist, I'm trained as a pianist, therefore you should this or that. That's all bullshit. Okay, I also play piano. Okay, I play scale. Anyway, I love piano. I have articles on piano key actions. But anyway, with many of these nerds, they'll say, oh, it's really, because they play piano, therefore you should be this way or that way. That's usually bullshit. I do miss something. Okay, I think that's it for today. Float to the max today because your roomies are sleep. I think you are now able to flow to the max. Big Kobe slow death. Okay, that makes me sad. Be sure to tell Asian. Okay, I think that's it for today. Thank you guys for coming, listening to my rant for 70 minutes. Good night, guys. And thank you. Let's see, Airy Ran. Thank you, Airy Ran, for the donation. Bye, guys. Bye, guys. 1 more minute. Bye, guys. And there's some question about my biography, some sort of biography. Let's talk about that next time. Some question about biography. Internship at Wolfram. Yeah, some people ask me about that. I did talk about that one time. Okay, so you search for XahTV Wolfram, okay, on YouTube. Find a YouTube that's XahTV Wolfram. You might see it. I did a lot of videos. By now it's like 200 or 300. So I don't know. Noise in the back. Okay, bye, guys.